Welcome back to another episode of the Balance and Improve podcast, where we read a book a week and we break down the challenging, complex ideas in that book and turn them into actionable steps for progress. My name is Chris Pound.
My name is Landon Eller.
And the book that we will be continuing to talk about is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, so just a brief reminder of who Napoleon Hill is. He grew up in the early 1900s and he had a bit of a rough start. He was born into poverty. He was orphaned at 12, but he really found his passion at the age of 13 when he began writing. And eventually he went to school to go two different paths in journalism. And then he used the journalism degree to fund law school. And one of his big breaks was he was put in charge of interviewing Andrew Carnegie. And this is when he gave him the task to find the secret of wealth accumulation and happiness. And he set out and that he made that his life's desire or goal.
Now that you have a better understanding of who Napoleon Hill was, I'll briefly talk about the four main concepts that we talked about last week, starting with thoughts are powerful. And then we dove into desire as the starting point. From there, we jumped to faith makes desire real. And lastly, the thing we covered was auto-suggestion programs.
Yeah, so getting right into what we're going to cover today, we'll start off with specialized knowledge. And there's two different types of knowledge that Hill argues, and it's general knowledge and specialized knowledge. General is more like having a blanket knowledge about a whole bunch of different things, where specialized is the more important, is the kind of knowledge that you should have. And this is information that's organized and intelligently directed towards a specific purpose. And he went on to say that knowledge is only potential power. And I think I agree with him, because you need to direct that knowledge in some way in order for it to become useful.
And so the first initial thought in my head when talking about the difference between general knowledge and specialized knowledge, first thing that came to my head was the school system, right? And this might be a controversial topic. However, I think it's important for us to kind of break down, do we feel like the school system is focusing more on general knowledge or specialized knowledge? And do you feel like there are any benefits? Obviously there are benefits to general knowledge, right? But do we feel like there should be more of an emphasis on specialized knowledge within the school systems from a younger age?
What Hill said is that blanket of foundational knowledge is good. Like, no one should drop out of school, if that's what you're getting at.
No. But do you think that, because when I kind of think of specialized knowledge, I'm thinking more of like trades, right? Where a person goes into a specific area to learn a specific skill. They become a master in that skill, which means that they have a good amount of specialized knowledge. However, if you go to a university per se, you're learning more about a lot of different things. So you're not necessarily specialized in one area or one field within that entire college business, right? I mean, we've taken how many different classes, whether it be an ethics class, an accounting class, a business law class, finance classes, economics classes. We take so many different classes, but how do you feel like there could be an improvement on the amount of specialized knowledge within the school system?
I think I disagree with you there.
Okay.
There's, like, the specialized knowledge will be developed once you pick your path. Like,
Yeah.
I think especially in early schools, it's just about developing that ground foundational knowledge. And then when you get into that secondary schooling, if you go into the trades or whatever, that's when the real specialized knowledge starts to accumulate. Like, you don't have to, even though we have a wide variety of like business law, economics classes, like, we don't go into depth in them. It's just getting us dipping our toes in the water.
So you feel like the specialized knowledge comes more of after school per se? You learn it more while you're in the field through experience or different opportunities per se?
I think it comes through two ways. It comes through, he pulled it, what does educate mean? And he pulled the Latin root educo from the word, and it means to educe or develop within or draw out. So from there, you can develop that specialized knowledge in two ways. You can go to a university and study immensely. Like if you're going into chemical engineering, like you're going to be really specialized into that field. Or if you think about it from like accumulating it from others, and this goes into the mastermind we'll talk about, or like the Elon Musk, the Andrew Carnegie's, the Henry Ford's. You think they knew everything about the car industry, about how rockets work, about the steel industry? No, they just built the right team so they could call on them for specialized knowledge and get their questions answered. So I think it's just about how, whatever knowledge you need to fulfill your purpose, it's about how you use it, and you got to know when to find it.
I also think you need to determine what kind of knowledge that you're looking for, per se, right? If there's a specific type of thing that you want to do, you need to almost become an expert. And Hill emphasizes that if you're going to be providing a service for people, you need to become an expert in that field in order to provide the value in exchange for monetary equivalent.
Yeah, but at the same time, like go back to Henry Ford. Like he didn't know everything about. It's just about where can you find the information, and if you don't know it yourself, develop the group around you so you can find that right specialized knowledge. And I think that's what we're trying to do by reading these books is you have to put it into use. So that's why we try to do the implementation segment that we usually post on our YouTube.
Now moving on to principle number 5, which is imagination, the workshop of the mind.
Yeah, so kicking it off, your thought impulses that you have or ideas, they turn into reality through your imagination. If you think about it, when you first have an idea and then you just let your mind ponder on that, you start to develop you can see it in reality and you can develop an action plan behind it. So that's kind of the bridge on how your thought impulses use imagination to turn it into its physical equivalent.
Yeah, imagination is only limit to what we can create. It must be developed and used over time. So I guess throughout life, there are always creative people, right? Whether they're artists or musicians or even business leaders, people have to come up with creative ways in order to solve different types of complex issues. Like think about Amazon, right? I mean, when Jeff Bezos first started, it was simply just a bookstore, an online bookstore. And over time, he got creative and he started to adapt to the changing environment that he was living through and slowly incorporated different products from different areas around the world into one place, one shopping online mall, essentially. And look where he's at now.
Yeah, and it's like a muscle. Like he probably used his imagination often to create stronger and stronger ideas. And one far-fetched example that Hill provided in the book was Dr. Frank. He was a preacher, and I'm not going to say his last name because I'm going to butcher it, but he wanted to reform the educational system, but he didn't want to rise through the ranks at a typical university. He wanted to create his own, and to do that, he needed $1 million. So he had this thought for 2 years, and he was trying to figure out how to put it into action. So he used his imagination, and what it said was, he said he was going to get that $1 million within 1 week by performing a sermon where he preached what he would do with that $1 million and step by step educated the people listening to his sermon. And at the end, someone named Philip Armour came up and actually offered him $1 million, which translated into the founding of the Armour Institute of Technology. So something as small as that, using your imagination to come up with creative ideas.
And I think it's important to recognize the persistence that Dr. Frank had in this endeavor, right? He got denied multiple times before he eventually did find the person who saw the same vision for the education system that Dr. Frank had, right? It just was a matter of time before he was able to connect the different dots and actually implement his plan into success, right? He planted that seed and then he watered it with the $1 million, and eventually it blossomed into a beautiful maple tree.
Yeah, so I guess in summary, would you say it's just imagination allows you to turn your ideas or thought impulses into actionable plans?
I think you definitely have to imagine yourself doing the thing before you can actually do it, if that makes sense. because if you never really take time and think things out, when you're hit with objections or failures per se, you won't necessarily understand how to get through those unless you've thought them out ahead of time, or that you've even given yourself the ability to take a step back and rethink about things, right? Use the Adam Grant theory, the think again theory. You're never going to come up with a solution to a problem, or you're hardly ever going to find a solution to a problem the first time around, right? It takes multiple repetitions, and you constantly have to be thinking differently in order to solve different types of problems.
So just letting your imagination run.
Exactly. You can't limit your imagination, because if you limit your imagination, you are limiting yourself. Moving on to the sixth principle is organized planning.
Yeah, I thought this chapter was a little bit all over the place, and he ties in a bunch of different ways of why organized planning is important. First two kind of hit or tie in together, and it says that great success requires the cooperation of others. Very seldomly do you by yourself achieve great success in whatever endeavor you're trying to tackle. So that means you need a great team around you. And this goes on to the second point, where that being a great leader is extremely important, and you have to be able to tie in the faculties of being very sympathetic as well as facilitating the cooperation of others. And I just think about Ben Horowitz when we read The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Is his company was going to fail, so he basically had to extract one small part of the company that they were currently doing. He had to let go a whole bunch of people, basically reconstruct his whole business, but he still had to fire up his team. And because he was very sympathetic and he facilitated that cooperation of others, he was able to eventually perform a successful exit at the end.
Yeah, Hill really emphasizes the two different types of leadership, right? Leadership by consent and leadership by force. He goes on to say that if you're trying to be a leader by force, you will not be able to lead these people for very long, right? When you're forcing ideas and different thoughts upon a group of people that those people don't necessarily see the same things that you see, it often leads to resentment, right? Because if someone's constantly barking at you and ordering you to do this and that, but you don't understand why, right? You don't see the purpose in going through all these different challenges, you are going to slowly resent this person. You're going to slowly dislike this person because you don't have the same vision. And that's not a bad thing per se, right? But it just, you have to understand that the better type of leader is the leader who leads through consent, right? He is he has the sympathy of his followers. They want to follow him rather than him making them follow. And so it's important to understand the difference between leading by consent and leading by force.
Yeah, that leadership.
Yeah.
By consent was what I was
Yeah.
trying to convey without explicitly saying it. But that also he touches on organized planning in terms of you have to know yourself in order to sell yourself. And here's where the QQS formula comes into play: quality, quantity, and spirit. What's the quality of the work looking like? What's your quantity? How much are you able to produce? In spirit, like what attitude are you doing it in? So in terms of why this is important is because you have to understand each of those three areas when you're going out to sell your services, whether that be in a job interview or actually in the business market.
Yeah, do you tend to plan things out before you jump right in, or do you kind of just go with the flow? You're definitely more of a structured guy, right? You like to have a plan in place before you dive headfirst into anything. And that's something that I need to work on, because I always find myself diving headfirst into things before I truly plan them out. And now, obviously, that takes time in order to implement, but how has planning things out worked in your favor?
I think there's a time and a place for both in terms of planning out and jumping right in. But when you think about it from a work perspective, most of the time you're going to want to plan it out. Why? Because I want to try to anticipate any obstacles I'm going to have beforehand, or any other potential solutions that might work better for the long run. So before I even start the task. So that's doing a lot of upfront work to make sure that those things don't happen in the future. But don't make sure you don't get backed up against a wall where you're so focused and you get analysis paralysis and then you can't make a decision. So I actually took the Clifton 5 strengths and it gives you your top 5 strengths, and one of mine is deliberative, and it shows that you think through all your options, you anticipate obstacles and things like that. But one of the downfalls if you're too deliberative is that you get narrowly focused and then you can't make a decision.
And the reason I bring this up, because Hill earlier in the book mentioned that if you have an idea, you need to act upon that idea immediately. The plan will kind of fall into place afterwards. And so I guess these 2 points kind of contradict each other, right? This is saying that you need to have a plan, you need to follow the plan, and if that plan fails, you need to come up with a different plan, right? Don't change the idea, change the plan.
And the last thing we'll touch on before we move on to the final one for today, which is decision, is the principle tied into organized capital. And I thought this was interesting how he covered it, because you need organized planning to make sure capital gets put into use correctly. So he gives the example of a simple breakfast. Think eggs, grapefruit juice, tea, and sugar. Back way before our time, you would have to go to Asia to get the tea, South America to get the sugar, your local dairy farm to get the butter, or if they have chickens too, you gotta get the eggs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But now, because people were able to sufficiently use capital in terms of creating a logistics system, creating manufacturing lines, training a workforce to run those manufacturing lines, what used to take a bunch of time before now takes like less than 10 minutes to create a breakfast through the use of organized capital.
Yeah, the best example of organized capital is Milton Friedman's How a Pencil Was Made. Milton Friedman is one of the most well-known economists ever, but he does a great job of breaking down all the different things that go into place when it comes to creating a simple pencil. So I really encourage you guys to check that out in your free time. But moving on to the 7th principle, which is decision, or the master of procrastination.
I just think of it in terms of iterate. So when you make a decision, you're making either a yes or no answer. And if you make a decision to iterate, try something new, then it's going to kill whatever was in the other thing or wasn't working or what's causing you to not be productive. So Hill argued that successful people make decisions fast and then are slow to change them. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's been a topic covered in a lot of different books that we've read, is the fact that you need to be making decisions quicker. The quicker you can make a decision, the better off you will be, because you can always go back and change that decision after the fact. But if you sit there and stew on it for a month or a quarter of the year, then there's really no wiggle room with that decision. But if you make a decision right away, I think you can always go back and change it if it's not how you envisioned it in the first place.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird how he said, but be slow to change it. I think you should still be open to changing your decision fast if the data backs that you should change it fast.
And I think, again, it depends on the situation, right? I mean, you don't know if a decision is going to pan out, per se, until after the fact, right? And you can plan all you want for that decision to work out, but until it's put into action, that decision will not show its true colors until it shows its true colors.
Yeah, and the direction he took it in the book was, take July 4th, for example. We all remember that day because it's written in all of our history books. But what Hill was arguing was there's a few key decisions that happened beforehand that without those, we wouldn't have July 4th as we do today. So that was in the likes of John Hancock, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. They all made the decision to not, they were offered bribes essentially to stop saying malicious things about the British government, or stop raising uproars about what they were doing.
They had a very important decision to make. Either they could surrender and give up with the idea that they will never have their own independence, or that they can fight and eventually and hopefully all will work out and they will gain their independence. But there are a lot of things that went into that. They planned it, right? They didn't just jump right into it. Otherwise, unfortunately, they probably would have been killed if they had no planning per se.
Yeah. So they made the decision to form the First Continental Congress, which ultimately led to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or July 4th as we call it today.
Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up the next 4 principles of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Again, we won't really have an implementation until the next episode. We want to be able to go through all of the different principles and find the one thing that we can truly implement in our everyday life. There are a lot of things in books that you want to implement in your life.
Just a lot.
There's a lot, right? And so you have to plan it out, really. You have to think about it. You have to think, okay, how is this going to impact me immediately? You're looking for the immediate things that you can put into action. And so with that being said, again, there will be no implementation from this week.
I guess a quick update, going back to Food Can Fix It. Any updates on how veggies and fruits are?
Yeah, I mean, I really need to start eating better. I mean, and it really dawned on me last night. It's like, no matter how much time and effort someone puts into the gym, that's only like max 25% of it, right? The other 75 is what you put into your body. And right now I feel like I'm lacking in that aspect of my life. I don't feel like I take it quite seriously enough. And part of it is the environment I'm in. Living with 5 other guys with 1 fridge makes things a lot more difficult because I can't plan what I'm going to eat. And again, and that really plays right into this book, is being able to plan. If you know what you're going to eat every single day and you can pre-make it for that entire week, right, you're good to go. Like you do that, right?
I do.
See, I don't have that luxury, right? I literally don't have the space in the fridge in order to make a week's worth of meals, whether that be for lunch, dinner, or breakfast. I just don't have.
So do you go to the grocery more than once a week?
I think I go to the grocery 1 main time a week.
So you go to the grocery that 1 main time, make everything up and store it in containers. It's not going to take any.
I'm telling you, we literally don't have space. You live with 2 other guys.
Sounds like an excuse.
You live with 2 other guys. I live with 4.
If you wanted to, you would find a way.
I've tried.
Okay.
I've tried. But what about you? How is the meal plan going for you? How do you feel?
Still satiated. Nothing really bolstering in terms of my energy levels or how I feel normally, but I am enjoying the breadth of what I'm trying. Like, I had lentils this week. Never had those before, but they were honestly pretty dang good.
Moving on to the favorite quotes from this week. This week we both do just have one, so I'll let you kind of go ahead and
Kick it off.
yeah.
So mine was, a quitter never wins and a winner never quits. And I just think that's very fitting, because throughout it's about a year now that we've been cooking on this podcast, and
Cooking.
sometimes I don't want to do it anymore,
No.
but
We're determined, right?
Yeah.
We see no point in giving up, because this goes right into my quote. If you give up before your goal has been reached, you are a quitter, right? And I'm not a quitter, right? I'm not going to give up on the things that I want to achieve. So yes, it's a lot of work sometimes, but is it worth it? I think in the long run, I think it'll all pan out and all work out. But until you let failure become your reality, it's just a little bit of a setback, rather, right? But when you start to see yourself as a failure, or if you start to actually believe that this failure is going to end your dream, that's when it becomes an issue, right? That's when you become a quitter. If you never give up, right? I'm not saying change your plan, right? You need to be able to change and adapt to the environment, but don't quit. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your dreams. So that pretty much wraps up this week's episode of Bound to Improve. Don't forget to check us out on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, all at Bound to Improve.
And also, when you go in the episode description, check out the new link tree that we have set up. You'll be able to see all the books that we have read and where we found them at, as well as the episode tied to them. So if you're curious about how we read Straight from the Gut by Jack Welch, you could go and check out where we bought it from, as well as the episode tied to it. So we encourage you all to do that.
So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.